Today, I'm going to show you how to paint a super easy pumpkin using just 3 colors of acrylic paint. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button and support this public school teacher's side hustles. I have free art tutorials and lessons. Find me on Instagram and TikTok at thatartteacher_Machado. I will list my materials in the description box. I'm using some brushes, I'm using a paint palette, and I'm using 3 colors of acrylic paint. I'm also using a very tiny little canvas. With one of my brushes, a flat brush, I'm going to start by using ultramarine blue in a corner. With this technique, we're going to be working wet on wet, so use similar colors that you can mix together on your canvas directly. So maybe a blue and a purple, a pink and an orange, or for me, I'm using blue and teal, colors that are very similar. We'll be using white to create our pumpkin, and we're going to be working mostly with wet paint. This is going to be a very quick and easy painting, and you can have your background as detailed or as simple as you would like. I am globbing the paint on kind of thick because I don't want it to dry before I add the details of the pumpkin. You can clean your brush as you just saw me do, or you can have 2 different brushes for each color. And I'm just thinking about fun textures. You could do sponges if you wanted, just to kind of fill your background with the 2 colors of your choice. You could do 3 if you wanted, but don't do too many, especially colors that when blend together would make brown, or a color that is not mixable wet on wet. So I'm going to now paint the shape of my pumpkin with my small round brush using white paint directly on the background I just painted. So with this technique, what I'm not doing is letting my background dry, and I am not using a pencil to sketch it out. One of the best ways to advance your painting skills is to forget about a pencil altogether and think of the pencil or the paintbrush as your pencil. I also recommend looking at pictures of pumpkins, or better yet, have one sitting right in front of you. So a simple Google search, you can find a pumpkin that you're inspired by the shape. They all have kind of different shapes and colors, and I do recommend, if this is like a blue painting, to Google blue pumpkin. And what I'm focusing on now is just creating those kind of bulbous, separate shapes that create the pumpkin. The hardest part for me is getting that back area so it looks 3D. You could do it to where you can't see that back area. So if you're more of a beginner, think about finding a pumpkin where you only see the top edges and you don't see that back section where the stem overlaps in front of. Totally depends on your skill level. Keep in mind too, if you make a mistake, you can just wipe off your paint and try again. I'm painting on a very small canvas, so this won't take me long. And keep in mind, if you're painting larger, your paint might dry quicker because it takes you longer to paint. I'm also using my flat brush here because I like how it fills those sections nice and smooth. So you'll see me kind of going back and forth with different brushes. And I'm just mapping out my shape here, seeing how the background kind of cuts through. And then let me put that stem so I can do the background work and make sure that the back of the pumpkin looks real. Now that I've done a lot of work with my white, I'm going to go back in with my darkest color, which is blue, and try to kind of shape these separate sections. The white paint is nice. I think it blended well with the background, but I'm going to try and give it a little more value and a little bit more definition for each piece. I'm using a small pointy brush, so a round brush here. So make sure with whatever brushes you're using, you have a variety of different sizes and shapes. And you might find that you have a couple favorites, and you can do the technique where you use 1 brush per color. And you can also do the technique where you just rinse it each time. Just make sure you dry it with a paper towel so that your paint's not too watery. Every brand of paint's gonna be slightly different too. This paint that I use in the classroom is pretty thin, so I have to be very careful about that. If you're using a more heavy-bodied paint, you might not mind having a little bit more on there. I'm going to revisit the white because I want this to pop out and have a really nice highlight to contrast that shadow that I just added. And again, looking at a pumpkin and really paying attention to those areas of dark and light will be really helpful. If you are new to painting, you could do this in black and white, and that would very much simplify this. So instead of thinking color, you could think value. I'm going to let it dry at this point, and I'm going to go back in so you can see the paint is not mixing because I let it dry. For a painting this size, it only took like 20 minutes for the whole thing. You could wait overnight if it's a larger painting. You could use a hairdryer. You could put it out in the sun. And I really want to redefine, using my white paint, those sections of the pumpkin and really push my highlights. I like that the background is showing through, but I also want to make the pumpkin look 3D and look like it is in front of and sitting in the space of the background itself. So I'm just using the white paint to kind of clean up those lines. And you can see that you can still see the colors of the background shining through. It gives it lots of harmony, but allowing it to dry and doing a second layer is tightening up the painting a little bit. That's why I like to start with the background. If you paint the subject first, what are you gonna do with the background? It's so much harder to go back in. I always prefer do the background first, especially in a painting, and then build up from there. I'm going back in with my turquoise, and I'm going to layer on top here, on top of the white, and this is wet on wet. So the background's dry, but the white paint in this layer is not. And I could have left it more of a white painting, but I'm more interested in creating some dynamic colors, mixing that blue and that turquoise on top. The beauty of acrylic paint is if you don't like your layers, let it dry and do it again. You could do this technique over and over again. Acrylic paint is super blendable. It's super layerable. Layerable, is that a word? And so even if you don't like your results, you can still paint over it and try again. I like that this is a little bit cleaner. So that white paint is really keeping its highlight, but it's allowing the turquoise paint to kind of blend in a nice way. And I will go back and visit the blue again. And I'm gonna end with some textures of white to give it kind of like a highlight, but also a more natural look of texture. I really love the stem of the pumpkin. It's fun to kind of go back in and add a little curlicue line. And now I'm thinking shadows. I'm thinking my darker area. And I love how that echoes the blue in the background. So if you have a picture, look and see where the pumpkin curves in. Where is there a darker area? Where is there a spot that has a shadow? And I'm using my small brush to kind of blend there. Using white, it will make it lighter. So think about adding it in an area where the white isn't as thick. And I feel like I'm more successful back here with the shadow, the back part of the pumpkin behind the stem, which I didn't quite get the first time. So if you get a shape right the first time, my advice is leave it alone. And if you don't, be like me and go back in and layer. Continuing here with my small pointy brush, my round brush, to try and get those nice defined shadows. I love working wet on wet because it just blends the paint for you. Seeing if I can get my shadow where the pumpkin rounds in. And a pumpkin is such a great still life object because it has such character, and it really is such a great study of value and form. Really learning how to see those areas of light and dark will make your painting take to the next level. Working wet on wet can be a little bit stressful if you're not used to it. My students really like to sketch things out and save their background for last. And doing a technique like this really pushes you to think like a painter, to fill that space in the back and to work in layers. Adding a little bit of a highlight here in the stem, the top of this edge. I'm applying it in less of a smooth technique to get a nice kind of textured highlight area, as if the light is shining right down on it. So I'm just continuing on this second section on the left-hand side, taking my round brush, and as you can see, applying it not in a smooth, but kind of in a textured format. And I feel like this really pushes the pumpkin into the foreground. It really allows the pumpkin to look 3D. And notice I never use black. I let my shadow just be that dark blue. All right, I'm gonna call it here. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more painting tutorials, check these out. Also, my website, thatartteacher.com, has free lessons, tutorials for artists painting at home or for the classroom teacher.